It is Wednesday, my dudes, and of course you know what that means. It is time once again to revisit Velocity Lake, in which we will continue construction of the B&M Giga Coaster, which, as you can see, the bulk of the coaster layout is now all done. Just a few kind of little bits of smoothing to fine-tune here and there, which is what I'm starting off the footage with. But for the most part, this episode we're going to be working on the supports, including the main big support, custom support thing for the drop, which I think I mentioned last week was kind of the biggest factor in making this thing look the deal, like the classic B&M Giga drop with its iconic support structure. That will help really sell this as a B&M Giga, so that's going to be one of the things we do in this episode. I'm also going to finally finish the layout, like get it to its final form. I know I've said the past few episodes I've always finished the layout, but then I've kind of said, oh yeah, but the last bit I was never quite happy with, it's not quite final. Not the case anymore. We're going to get the final form of the last part of the layout done this episode, so the coaster itself will all be complete. Trying to think what else we cover in this episode. We'll build another tunnel, the second tunnel, I think, and I think that's it. So I'm just going to leave you guys in silence now. I'll see you in the next episode. I'm just joking. I mean, I've made that joke a couple of times, but then I feel like I have to reverse it because it would just make the episode objectively a lot better if I did just stop talking for the rest of it. So maybe I shouldn't keep on making that joke. Anyway, as you can see, I'm building this part in the 4-meter smoothing technique, and that you build it in the smallest. I know I mention this pretty much every time I mention the phrase 4-meter smoothing, but I appreciate there are always people out there that don't know what it means. A bit like when I'm always going on about what a Juna transfer window is. If you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Juna, it makes an angle of 45 degrees at the sun. But I say that every time in Kerbal videos when I'm doing that very specific thing, because I appreciate this might always be somebody's first watch of my stuff. They might not know about these things, so I like to clarify anyway. So I'm going to do that. The 4-meter smoothing technique is when you build things out of the smallest possible pieces in Planet Coaster's coaster editor, which is 4-meter long pieces. And I said this a bit awkward now because now I've just noticed I deleted all the work I did with the 4-meter technique and I've just used the coaster editor as intended. Whatever. I'll continue going on about it nonetheless because I'll probably use it at some point in this video. But if not, the whole coaster was pretty much, as in like the first main part of the coaster at least, was made using the 4-meter technique. You build the coaster out of the 4-meter pieces and then you select 4 of those pieces at a time, press smooth once, drag the selection along 1 notch. So not kind of to the next 4, just like you take off one of the pieces from your chunk and add one on, so it's just like 1 notch along the chain. I hope that makes sense. Press smooth again and do that for the whole layout. Usually about 8 times is what's needed to get it perfectly smooth. So it's a very grueling, very arduous and very boring, quite frankly, process, but it is what you need to do if you want to get a nice, smooth roller coaster. Which I think this is ultimately what the roller coaster ultimately came out pretty smooth. Pretty smooth. What a great horrible sentence that was. So see, I'm looking at this and it's not quite the final layout, but it's pretty much a good representation of how this thing eventually ends up looking. So how much longer? We're only 3.5 minutes in. I was like, well, we must be near the end of the commentary now. I've talked about everything. So what could I possibly... I mean, last episode I did a little review of Hick's beer. Maybe I could do another a beer review. I'm going to review Carling. Do you like the taste of urine? Well, do I have the beer for you? Carling... I don't know. I mean, I'm not very good at reviewing anything, actually, come to think of it. Especially things like whiskey and beer. So I'm probably not the best person to be making a series like this. I don't know. When I'm at a pub with my mates, I do tend to go for lagers over ales. When I want to drink beer at home, I don't really drink beer very often, to be honest. If I'm drinking beer at home, it's usually an ale of some kind. Hick's is usually my first choice. Do like myself a good Tribute. Do like a good Spitfire as well. What's the other one I like? Beast of Exmoor, that's pretty good. There's all sorts I'm in the mood for. When I'm out, if I'm going to drink ale, it will usually be kind of the more golden ones. So again, your Tributes, your jail ales, that sort of thing. But usually I go for like the lagers. So I like a Korev from St. Austell again. If I have to go for like a normie lager because I'm in like a Wetherspoon or something, usually a Heineken. But I don't know. We're clutching at straws. They're all pretty much the same. I'm sorry, guys. Lager is all pretty much the same. Okay. You can get nice lager, you can get bad lager, but then that's it. There isn't really that much nuance to it, in my humble opinion, which is not an expert opinion by any stretch of the imagination, but it's opinion nonetheless, and that's why I feel happy sharing it. Oh, look, that was the POV. And hey, look at that. Just glancing up, I'm pretty sure that's it for the layout. We've got the final layout done. I guess we're doing some smoothing. I'm just correcting the banking. I was probably watching the G-force values. The lateral G-force is the thing that's quite hard to get right in Planet Coaster. You've got to make sure the banking is right, and sometimes you have to bank corners a lot more aggressively than you think you would have to. And for this bit, that final corner of the train does go round it much faster than I would want it to, but it keeps the excitement rating up. Like, the in-game excitement rating drops quite a bit when I send the car down at realistic speed. So if this were a real ride in real life in a real theme park, I would have the first brake run. I would have the first brake run be a lot more aggressive than what it is in this version of the ride. And there's the stats all done. So it's in the high 7s, I think, the excitement rating at the moment. But that will increase quite a bit when we finish all the scenery. The more scenery you have around the ride, including things like the station, the higher the excitement rating goes up. And of course, near misses when going at high speed is always a great way of bumping up that rating, which is a great justification for building tunnels. I mentioned last episode that I wanted the train to dip below ground level at certain points, just because that's always fun. You know, things like Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain, or indeed, Nemesis, Oblivion at Alton Towers. It's always really cool how they disappear underground. You can never quite see what the track is doing. Even though you know what it's doing, you're like, oh, I wonder how deep it goes. And I have no idea. It just adds a little bit of excitement to go whooshing through a tunnel at great speeds underneath the ground. That's what I wanted to do for this ride. But the stock tunnels in the game, they're not that great. You basically need to build a stock tunnel in Planet Coaster, I suppose. You just have the coaster track clip into the ground, and it will just create a tunnel around you, but it's literally just dirt and earth forming the tunnel, which is not that realistic. I don't know of any real-life rides that have tunnels like that, except the ones that are artificially constructed, so things like Expedition Everest, things like that. I'm talking about in actual hillsides, in actual mountains. I can't say I'm aware of any that just use natural tunneling, because that's not very structurally sound. So I'm building kind of an artificial tunnel here, and then we'll just shape the landscape around the tunnel. It's how I'm going to do it. And that's what I did last episode. But again, you may not have seen last episode, so I'm just going to talk about it this episode too. We're actually constructing the tunnel a little bit differently last time. This is a much easier way and a much quicker way of constructing the tunnel. Although admittedly, it doesn't end up looking quite so good. Like, it's a lot more jagged, looks a lot more, I don't know, Lego-y, Minecraft-esque, but it's going to be buried underneath the ground, so I'm not too worried about how it ends up looking on the outside. As long as it looks okay on the inside, it'll be fine, and we're going to be flying through at such breakneck speeds that you're probably not going to notice one way or the other what the inside of the tunnel looks like. And there it is. You see it? And then we'll just shape the terrain around it. So what we're going to do first of all is just bury the entire thing, and then we'll just gradually, manually tunnel out to the shaft at ground track level. Like, we'll pound the camera down to track level. Basically what I'm doing now. You can kind of get the gist of what I'm doing. I know you can still see some of that kind of step-like appearance of the tunnel ceiling from the external shots. I'll just clean that up. I'll clean that up with some, flat coaster pieces, just to give the impression that it's actually a smooth, realistic-looking structure rather than this Lego-like appearance that we have at the moment. But yeah, I know it's still kind of got that steppy-like gradient on the inside, but I don't think it looks too bad. I know I did just justify that by saying, well, you're going so fast anyway that you wouldn't really notice. But even so, I don't think it looks too bad. So now I'm just trying to really sort of get the terrain as close to the structure as possible on the mouth and exit of the tunnel. Well, I guess it would be... Is it two mouths? The mouth and the anus of the tunnel doesn't quite sound right, so we'll just go with the two mouths of the tunnel. What was that? Just trying to get the terrain as close to the structure as possible, because although I'll be building a little bit of support to mask out, like to cover up the rest of the tunnel, I want to try and make it not too excessive. I don't know, I guess it would be even more realistic to maybe have the roof of the tunnel not underground, even though I don't know why that would be more realistic. So, because I have no idea. Let's just move along from this point. Here you go. Here you go. You can see me here covering up kind of the imperfections of the tunnel by extending the structure out a little bit, just so it hugs the landscape really, really closely. And again, we've got that weird sort of lip on the roof, so we'll just close that off with another little bit of structure. We'll do the same thing here. It's going to be a little bit harder with this mouth, because we've got some more track coming in very, very close proximity. And that corner actually is something I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. Like, the latter portion of this roller coaster's layout is much, much flatter than its first part. There's a lot less airtime, but I think because of that, it's still going pretty fast. So I think the G-forces are going to be pretty cool in that. I didn't actually check the G-forces. Maybe I should just check the vertical G-forces of that corner to see kind of how intense it will be. But that's my logic. That's why we've got this big flat corner that doesn't really ascend or descend, because the train will still have lots and lots of momentum. So you should get some nice G-forces as you get pressed into your seat as you whip around the corner at breakneck speed. That's the corner there. Now I'm just sort of enclosing. Again, I was trying to sort of neaten up the entrance to this tunnel. I didn't end up going with quite so much structure. Here. So I just deleted it a little bit. And that's the mouth for this side. So not quite as good looking, I think, as the other end. But nonetheless, I think it looks serviceable. And that's the second tunnel. So now we've got both of the tunnels all pretty much complete, aside from the fact that I want the whole area to be forested. So there'll be trees and stuff. Maybe not growing directly above the tunnels, but having some sort of shrubbery or anything like that above the tunnels. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to show a quick POV to show you what we've got so far. There's the first tunnel. Whip around this ampersand element. I don't know what it would actually be called, but it kind of looks like an... actually, it doesn't really look anything like an ampersand. Anyway, that's the tunnel, so we can just, fly through the rest of the POV. I don't really need to show you that, because I just wanted to showcase how it now looks with the tunnels, and obviously the rest of the layout isn't really greatly affected. Do not worry, my dudes. I will still be showing a complete POV at the end of this video, just to kind of show you, I guess, the whole the layout as a whole, after we've done more stuff to it. But for now, time is of the essence. It is time to move along to working on the supports, because at the moment, this coaster, well, a marvel in engineering in terms of its, the fact it can just float there, not that realistic looking. So we're going to go ahead and sort out the lack of supports, which won't be a lack of... we're going to add supports, basically, is what I'm trying to say in a really horrendous roundabout way. So I just decided I couldn't really be bothered to do full custom support, so I just did some stock supports for the end of the track, and we were using stock supports for pretty much the entire layout, I think, except, of course, like I said, for the main drop, which we're going to use that very iconic modern B&M Giga structure for supports in the main drop, where we kind of build it's kind of like it's like a normal coaster track, but with a very, very, very thick with 2C's spine, just to kind of add loads and loads of strength to it, so that it doesn't actually need that many vertical poles, like stands, holding it up. Not a great explanation, I admit, but I guess that you probably are familiar with what things like, Fury 325 look like with their drop, and the upcoming Orion coaster. They all incorporate that classic B&M structural support. And hey, if you still don't know, you're about to find out what that looks like in this video. And in fact, if you've seen the series Neptune Park, we made a B&M Giga in that, and I made a very similar kind of custom support structure for its first drop as well. Although I think this one is a much better roller coaster. In fact, all the roller coasters in this park are pretty much an upgrade on the ones found in Neptune Park, because I feel like I've got better as a Planet Coaster player. So even the first coasters of this park, I feel like the coasters of this park get progressively better, as does the kind of the scenery and theming as the series goes on. Because again, Neptune Park, Velocity Lake is almost a year old. I'm recording this on the 25th of February, 2020. And the actual park, I started building it around April last year, so we're nearly there. The reason I'm kind of recording this so far in the past for you guys, I think tomorrow I plan on releasing episode 37, and obviously this is episode 40. When I'm building a roller coaster, I like to record the commentaries almost back to back to back, just so I can remember what I've already talked about. So when I'm making videos that feature very, very similar content week on week, in that it's the same roller coaster, I don't want to end up repeating myself over and over, just covering the same points. So I like to record the commentaries fairly close together, just so I can recall exactly what it was I talked about, or usually in my case, what I didn't end up talking about and just went off on some random tangent about beer. So that's kind of why I'm recording this commentary so far in the past this time around, just because I wanted to make sure that the commentaries could remain fresh and exciting, or at least, as fresh and exciting as I can possibly make them, when it is still largely the same sort of thing, constructing a B&M Giga coaster. So we've got a good look so far. It's a little bit sharp, the contrast. The white of the track is not very thick. Usually with these, the actual kind of arch support is the same color as the track, but then there's a little accent sort of strip along the bottom that's a different color, the same color as the rest of the supports. Sometimes, I don't know. I just don't think it looked quite good. And what Fury 325's drop is like, at least, is that the actual arch support is the same color as the track, and then there's like a lime green highlight along the bottom of it. So that's what I ended up doing for this one. I changed the color of it to white, and then we'll add another sort of band to it. As you can see, it's constructed out of bands. We'll add one more layer of band, and that will be black. And that complements the rest of the ride. We're going for a very black and white theme. Just because I like the sort of sharp contrast of this ride. It's very sleek, very modern, very mysterious, black and white. I don't know. I just liked the color scheme, all right. And the rest of the supports are black, so I thought it'd be a nice sort of highlight to add a little black band to this part of the supports as well. I feel like this part of the commentary hasn't been very good, but I hope at least I managed to communicate my plan. Here you go. You can see me doing it here. So I kind of still had to make it by hand to do the top part of the arch because I was getting some zero framing. Zero framing, for those that don't know, is when you have two parts that kind of clip into each other like pixel perfectly. They get this kind of weird, glitchy, spazzy appearance. Like you can probably see it flickering. Like flickering is probably a better appearance there. It's probably hard to appreciate in the time lapse, but that's what it looks like in real time. Players of Kerbal Space Program, who I'm assuming a lot of you are, because that's probably how most of you found this channel, may be familiar with this when you're building space planes in Kerbal Space Program. When you place two wing pieces, but they're like along the same alignment, if you try and clip them together, you get a very sort of flickery, flashy appearance. The way you can solve that in Kerbal Space Program and in Planet Coaster is to just use the offset tool to literally offset them by like a pixel. So not to the point where it adds any significant change to the aesthetic of the ride, or at least, significant aesthetic changes to the ride in the case of Planet Coaster. Not so much a problem in Kerbal Space Program. Or again, in KSP, not so much to actually affect the physics of the aircraft, or how physics affects the aircraft. But it will get rid of that horrible sort of flickery appearance. That's how all my space planes in Kerbal Space Program, even though they use a lot of clipped wing pieces sometimes, they never have that flickery appearance, because I make sure I offset by just a fraction without angle snap on to get the very, very fine movements. That's how you get rid of it. It's called zero framing. I believe Bradley Wistons taught me that term. It was either Bradley Wistons or Strutz and Blitz, probably both of them whilst we were in one of our little group combos. I don't know. But that's what it is, zero framing. So I guess, I wasn't really watching the footage, but I guess that might have been one of the ways I fixed the flickering effect of the black band of the support when it was in contact with the white part. Obviously, it's not too much of a problem when the white part is clipped into another white part because it's the same color and same texture. So if there is that flickering, you would be able to see it because it's all the same. Yeah. Now, of course, the big, thick spine of the B&M support structure means that you don't need quite so many vertical supports holding the whole thing up. That does mean that you do still need some to hold it up. It doesn't quite beat in physics just yet. I imagine one day we'll get there when we can make a material so strong that you could perhaps make the whole archway unsupported, or at least, it will be self-supported. It doesn't need any further structural supports in the form of vertical beams holding it up. But for now, we're not there just yet. So we're going to build some nice thick supports holding it in place. So I'm using the very, very, very big coaster support pieces just to form the main supports of the lift hill. Then we'll do some slightly smaller ones that are actually tilted as well, like the ones that hold the downward part of the hill. The main slope are actually tilted themselves, and they're kind of all supported together by the big spine of the coaster as well as the main vertical supports that hold up most of the weight. So that's what I'm doing here. Hope you guys I really like how the supports for this hill turned out, actually. So hope you guys enjoy them as well. Try to think what else there is to talk about. I was just thinking about this. I don't think I've ever actually been on a B&M Giga coaster. I'm trying to think. I've been on B&M coasters, right? I always talk about things like Oblivion, Nemesis. I think Air is B&M as well, isn't it? Or Galactica. I refuse to call it Galactica. It is Air. It always is, always was in my, because I'm a dinosaur and I don't like change. So it's Air. But I don't think I've ever actually been on a B&M Giga coaster. I'm trying to think of the biggest coasters I've been on. I've been on Kraken at Orlando SeaWorld. SeaWorld Orlando, I guess it doesn't really need clarifying. That was pretty big. Don't know if it's really a Giga coaster, and it's not really like, because it inverts and all that, so it's more of a twister coaster going off RCT3 definitions of things. I'm trying to think. I've been on the big one, the Pepsi Max at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. That was a pretty big roller coaster. But I don't think I've ever actually been on a B&M Giga coaster. Like, they would say the biggest, in terms of the biggest roller coaster I've ever been on, Like, I've been on most of the ones in Florida in 2010, I want to say. Whatever year the Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket opened, that's when I was in Florida. It was just before it opened, so I never got to ride that. That's the year I was there. So things like, what was it, Mako, stuff like that, that wasn't all there at SeaWorld. We had the Incredible Hulk coaster. We had Dueling Dragons, rest in peace, F. Other big coasters, I've been to Magic Mountain. I've been on Goliath there. That was a pretty big one. X2, that was pretty big. But no, I don't think I've ever actually been on a B&M Giga coaster. So I'd like to go on it one day. Like I say, Fury 325 is a definite bucket list coaster. Orion looks pretty good as well. Who knows if that's going to actually overtake Fury 325 as the favorite, not only favorite B&M coaster, but in a lot of cases just favorite coaster ever for many, many people is Fury 325. Millennium Force is what I was trying to think the name of. Millennium Force is not a B&M Giga, obviously, but that's nonetheless a bucket coaster, as is Steel Vengeance. So really, Cedar Point would be the number one. If I had to go to one theme park, it would be Cedar Point, because that's got your Steve, your Steel Vengeance, your Millennium Force, Top Thrill Dragster. It's got that other one as well. It's got Maverick and a few others as well. It's like a very, very, and then I think it's Ohio, isn't it? And in the same state is King's Dominion? Is that it? It's the one with the building Orion, and I'm pretty sure it's in Ohio as well. So Ohio is basically the coast capital of the US. So that's definitely something I'd like to visit. I don't really know what else there is to do in Ohio, though. I'm very ignorant. Forgive my ignorance, if people are watching this from Ohio, and I've now deeply offended them. I mean, I was watching The Boys, the Amazon show, and he was like, Ohio sucks, so now I have to just go off what that guy said. That character that you're clearly not supposed to like or empathize with in any way. That guy, what was his name? The Deep or something? He was like, Ohio's terrible. But I don't know. I like roller coasters. He clearly didn't. So maybe I would have a different opinion to him. I don't really know what I'm talking about here. But I guess I'm just glancing back at the footage and I'm still just doing the same thing I've been doing throughout most of this episode, which is still constructing the sports. So I don't really know what else to say about stuff that's on topic. So I'm just going to avoid talking about the topic. What other things can I talk about? I mean, I'm recording this in my room, and there's like an old vent above the desk. I have no idea what it is or why. It's obviously something archaic. I live in a Victorian house, and it's obviously some relic from the past, because I went up into the attic, and it's just like a hole, like the vent, it just leads into the attic. It's just a gap. So what it is just a place where there's no insulation. So I really need to patch it up at some point. But I guess at one point, maybe it was part of a chimney or something like that, even though there are big fireplaces in my house that lead into actual chimneys. So I've got no idea what this vent is supposed to be. But nonetheless, because it's direct access to the loft, and the loft is literally just an attic, there's no kind of substantial wall to it, so I can hear like the weather quite clearly through this vent, and at the moment it is absolutely lashing it down, and I've got to go back out to work soon. I'm recording this commentary over lunch. I'm working in two different places from the morning and the afternoon, and I drove past my house over my lunch break, so I'm like, I'm just gonna go home for lunch, woohoo, and record a Planet Coaster commentary. And here we are, by the way, going back to the footage, here we are going along the layout, and as you can see, I think it turned out pretty nice. Like I said, we've got the rest of the supports to do, but like I say, most of them will be using the stock supports, so it won't take nearly as long as the actual big support structure we've been building for a very large chunk of this episode. Like I say, the main thing I wanted to showcase was that tunnel and the B&M support structure, and this bit here. You'd think the bank would be quite aggressive there, but if anything, I was a bit worried it wasn't quite banked enough. You do go through that at very high speed. That's one of the downsides of the Planet Coaster POVs. You don't really get a sense of G-force on them. Like, one of the things, I love this bit, actually. I love this already. Just seeing that support structure looming ahead. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to abruptly stop the POV just a second, because I wanted to make sure. I noticed here that we're coming very, very close to the bottom of the lift hill supports. I wanted to just make sure that if the tallest person on the right-hand side of the carriage stuck their hands out, they wouldn't hit that support structure. And it doesn't look like, in my humble opinion, there's clearly enough clearance there to not pose a threat. And speaking of that, it was I was reading an article about Millennium Force, because I was talking about this earlier. Apparently some engineer was riding on it when it first opened, and they were sticking their hands out, and they suddenly felt a very sharp pain and looked down at their hand and saw they'd like broken it. And apparently it was because they hit the support, and it's really, really hard to find information about this. But now on Millennium Force, I think it's like during the first overbank turn, if you look carefully, there is a piece of support with a bit cut out of it, and that's supposedly where he hit his hand. They had to quickly cut it out. I just remember reading about this vaguely, and this was a long time ago, so please, citation needed. None of this is true for to all intents and purposes. This is all work of fiction, but I'm pretty sure I remember reading about this. So maybe you guys have heard this story too about Millennium Force. This is a nice little ground view of what we've built so far. Like I say, the bulk of the coaster is now done. Just the support structure that needs doing, and of course, the station, maintenance shed, all that good stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few episodes. We're doing a nice little pan out to get a view of the rest of Velocity Lake and how this thing kind of impacts the skyline. But I'm just going to go and leave it now, fade off to an end screen. On the left-hand side is a link to the full Velocity Lake playlist, and on the right-hand side, it's just a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm. I wholeheartedly recommend checking out the description for things like Discord, Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, all that good stuff, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.